In this second episode of the series that I've created covering water mixable oils, I'll be covering Alla Prima painting technique. I will show you how I use water mixable oils with the Alla Prima technique and explain what the Alla Prima method is. Alla Prima is an Italian phrase that means at first attempt. It refers to a wet on wet approach whereby wet paint is applied to previous layers of still wet paint, usually in a single sitting. Over the years, the technique has been adapted by artists such as Van Gogh to Velázquez. The main focus of Alla Prima is edges, soft blended edges contrasted with edges that are sharply defined. Being able to control these edges and the way the paint mixes requires preparation of colours and a decisive handling of the material. As stated earlier, the main essence of Alla Prima is that it should be finished in one setting. However, the most important thing is that you should relax and have fun. Think of it as a sketch and don't force yourself to follow someone else's rules. Choose a subject that you feel comfortable with and that you will be able to finish in the time that you have. For example, you won't be able to paint detailed fabric and you won't be able to paint on a large canvas. Be realistic. For your work to go smoothly, it is advisable that you mix a selection of colours in advance. Sufficient quantities need to be made so there is enough paint on the tip of the brush to fall onto the painting, as opposed to a poorly loaded brush which is likely to just lift the last layer off the painting as it tries to deposit a small amount of paint. There are no such things as magic brushes, but without the right ones you'll be fighting against yourself. Long brushes such as flats and filberts are good because they have enough spring to them. When you load them up with paint, you can lay paint over paint because they have some give to them. Flats and filberts also make it easier to apply large areas of paint. Meanwhile, shorter brushes tend not to have the same feel, so they end up sweeping the paint away instead of laying it on. Stiff synthetic fibres that mimic natural bristles, as opposed to soft bristles, are like fine animal hair and tend to hold their shape longer than natural brushes. The weave of canvas tends to give a little more texture onto which the paint can adhere, and both canvas boards and stretched canvas can be used. On the other hand, a panel can make a very smooth surface. For example, paint moves around so fluidly on gesso primed panels. I like to create sketch pieces on paper treated with gesso. Either MDF or aluminium composite boards are good options when primed with acrylic gesso. Both surfaces have a similar feel. The advantage to using aluminium is that it's lightweight and doesn't warp much. When working Alla Prima, you can either work with paint direct from the tube or you can mix your paint with water or with a medium. When working wet in wet, you can blend softly on the canvas or the paper. What is essential towards the end is to recognise where extra emphasis is needed to resolve the picture. It's often darker accents or brighter, fresher colours that are needed to draw attention to certain key areas. If you are able to restate these contrasts of tone and colour, they will combine very well with the mid-tones and muted colours generated from the paint being worked together in the Alla Prima process. If you make a preparatory drawing for your painting, a glance at it now and then will remind you of what you first saw in the subject and what should be emphasised at the last stage. With faces, for example, it might be the features. With landscape, it might be the foreground or particularly bright colours. Try to experiment and make a mess. This can be hard if you usually work in a detailed style, but when you learn to put your inhibitions to one side, you'll be able to move forwards and start applying paint in a way that is new to you. As an exercise, you can practice applying brush strokes and mark making by using old boards or canvases. Give yourself a time limit. This is important because we so often start a painting with the best of intentions of trying to keep it fresh and spontaneous, but human nature and perfectionism take over, and before we know it, we've overworked the whole thing and lost what we had at the beginning. If you can practice working on small surfaces for a limited period of time, say for example 45 minutes or an hour, you can avoid the risk of overworking a painting by stopping and putting it aside whether you like it or not. If you aren't happy, just get another surface and do it again. This piece that we're looking at now, I tried to limit myself to 4 hours. It actually went over to 5, but this was a real challenge for me because usually my paintings take me between 16 to 20 hours. I hope you found this clip useful and that you will be able to join me in the next clip in the series on water mixable oils, which is about layering water mixable oils or fat over lean technique. If you would like to learn more about water mixable oils, then click on the thumbnail above.